The gunshot echoed through the small town of Willow Creek, causing a flock of birds to scatter from the oak trees. Rebecca Nelson clutched her 3-year-old daughter Lily to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs as she ran through the dusty streets. It was 1872, and the promise of a new life in this frontier town had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Rebecca's feet pounded against the hard, packed dirt as she darted between buildings, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The church steeple rose in the distance, a beacon of hope in her moment of desperation. Her husband Thomas had been dead for less than a day, murdered by the notorious Blackwell gang who'd come to collect a debt she hadn't even known existed. Now they were hunting her and Lily, determined to leave no witnesses. As Rebecca approached the weathered wooden church, she noticed the side door was slightly ajar. Without hesitation, she slipped inside, the cool interior a stark contrast to the blazing summer heat. The church was empty, the afternoon service hours away. Rebecca moved swiftly to the back of the building, finding a narrow space behind the last pew. "Lily, sweetheart," she whispered, setting her daughter down and crouching to meet her eyes. "I need you to stay here and be very quiet, like we're playing hide and seek. Can you do that for Mama?" The little girl nodded solemnly, her blue eyes wide with fear but trusting. Rebecca smoothed down Lily's blonde curls, so like her own, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Don't make a sound until I come back for you, no matter what." Rebecca slipped back toward the front of the church, peering out through a crack in the door. She needed to lead the Blackwell men away from Lily, to create a diversion that would give her child a chance. As she pushed the door open, a strong hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream. "Easy now," a deep voice murmured in her ear as she was pulled back inside the church. "I'm not here to hurt you." The man released her and Rebecca spun around, backing away until she hit the wall. He stood before her, tall and imposing in a dust-covered duster coat, a Stetson pulled low over his eyes and a star-shaped badge pinned to his chest. "Sheriff," she gasped, her voice barely audible. He shook his head. "Deputy Marshal Grant Reynolds, madam. I've been tracking the Blackwell gang for months." His eyes, the color of storm clouds, searched her face. "You're Thomas Nelson's widow," Rebecca nodded, tears threatening to spill. "They killed him last night. And now they're after me and my daughter because you're witnesses," he finished grimly. "Where is your child?" Rebecca hesitated, instinctively unwilling to reveal Lily's hiding place. The man's expression softened. "I understand your caution, Mrs. Nelson, but those men are close and I need to get you both somewhere safe." Before Rebecca could respond, the sound of approaching horses reached them. The marshal moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "3 of them coming this way," he muttered. "They must have tracked you here." Rebecca's heart seized with terror. "My daughter, where is she?" he pressed urgently. "Behind the church, hidden by the last pew," Rebecca whispered. The marshal nodded once and moved swiftly toward the back of the church. Rebecca followed, her chest tight with fear. When they reached the last pew, Lily was exactly where Rebecca had left her. Her small body curled into a tight ball, silent tears streaming down her face. The marshal crouched down, his movements gentle as he approached the frightened child. "Hello there," he said softly, his voice taking on a warmth Rebecca hadn't heard before. "My name is Grant. I'm here to help you and your mama." Lily's gaze darted to Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly despite her own fear. The marshal extended his hand to the child, who hesitantly placed her tiny palm in his. The sound of boots on the church steps made all 3 of them freeze. Grant's expression hardened as he drew his revolver with his free hand. "Mrs. Nelson," he whispered, "take your daughter and go through that back door. There's a creek about 50 yards behind the church. Follow it downstream. I've got a horse tethered at the miller's shed, a black stallion named Thunder. Wait for me there." Rebecca gathered Lily into her arms. "What about you?" Grant's eyes met hers, determination evident in his steady gaze. "I'll buy you time and meet you there. Those men won't set foot in this town again if I have anything to say about it." The front door of the church creaked open, and Grant positioned himself between the women and the entrance, his gun held steady. "Go," he urged. "I'll keep you both safe. You have my word." Rebecca hesitated only a moment longer before slipping out the back door with Lily, the marshal's promise echoing in her mind as she ran toward the creek. The cool water of the creek soothed Rebecca's aching feet as she waded downstream, Lily clinging to her neck. The sounds of gunfire from the direction of the church made her flinch, but she pressed on, determined to reach the rendezvous point. She prayed silently that the marshal would survive the confrontation. After what felt like an eternity, Rebecca spotted the miller's shed and the magnificent black stallion tethered nearby. The horse nickered softly as they approached, and Rebecca ran a tentative hand along its powerful neck. "Thunder," she whispered, and the horse bobbed its head as if in confirmation. Rebecca settled on a crate near the shed. Lily nestled in her lap and waited. The minutes stretched painfully into nearly an hour, and Rebecca began to fear the worst. Had the marshal fallen to the Blackwell gang? Were they now searching for her and Lily? Just as she was considering whether to flee or remain hidden, the sound of approaching footsteps made her tense. Rebecca pressed herself against the shed wall, one hand covering Lily's mouth to keep her quiet. "Mrs. Nelson," Grant's voice called softly. "Rebecca!" Relief flooded through her as she stepped out from behind the shed, Lily still in her arms. The marshal was dusty and disheveled, a cut above his right eye trickling blood down his face, but he was alive. "You're hurt," she said, moving toward him without thinking. Grant wiped at the blood with the back of his hand. "It's nothing, just a graze." His eyes moved over her and Lily, checking for injuries. "Are you both all right?" Rebecca nodded. "What happened with the Blackwell men? 2 are dead," he said grimly. "One got away, Riley Blackwell himself. He'll be back with reinforcements once he regroups. We need to get moving." "Where are we going?" Rebecca asked as Grant untethered Thunder. "I have a cabin about 10 miles north of here. It's remote, defensible. We'll be safe there while I figure out our next move." He swung up into the saddle with practiced ease, then extended his hand down to her. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Rebecca said, though it had been years since she'd been on horseback. Grant lifted Lily up first, settling her in front of the saddle, then helped Rebecca mount behind him. His body was warm and solid against hers as she hesitantly wrapped her arms around his waist to steady herself. "Hold tight," he instructed, and then they were off, Thunder's powerful strides carrying them away from Willow Creek and the danger that lurked there. They rode in silence for several miles, the rhythmic movement of the horse lulling Lily to sleep in the marshal's protective embrace. Rebecca's mind raced with questions, but she held her tongue, focusing instead on the unfamiliar intimacy of being pressed against this stranger who had risked his life for them. "Why were they after your husband?" Grant asked finally, his voice low so as not to wake the sleeping child. Rebecca sighed, the pain of Thomas's death still raw. "I don't know exactly. Thomas was a gambling man. I knew that when I married him, but he promised me he'd changed." She swallowed hard. 3 months ago, he started disappearing at night again. When I confronted him, he said he was working on something that would make us rich. Then yesterday, those men came to our house, demanding money Thomas apparently owed them. And when he couldn't pay, they shot him right in front of me, Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. I grabbed Lily and ran out the back door. We've been hiding since then, moving from place to place in town. I thought the church would be safe. Grant was quiet for a moment. Riley Blackwell doesn't leave witnesses, especially not women and children. You were lucky I was already in town tracking them. Why are you after them? Rebecca asked. The Blackwell gang has been terrorizing towns across 3 territories for the past year. Robberies, extortion, murder. 6 months ago, they hit a settlement called Pine Ridge. His voice tightened. My sister lived there with her husband and son. Blackwell killed them all when they couldn't meet his demands for protection money. Rebecca tightened her hold on his waist involuntarily, a gesture of sympathy. I'm sorry. I was a rancher before that, Grant continued, as if needing her to understand. Had a small spread in Colorado. Sold it all, pinned on this badge, and swore I wouldn't rest until Riley Blackwell and his gang faced justice. The landscape had gradually changed as they rode, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills covered with pine trees. The air grew cooler as they climbed in elevation, and Rebecca found herself grateful for the warmth of the marshal's body against hers. Almost there, Grant said as they crested a hill. Below them lay a small valley, and nestled against the tree line was a modest log cabin with a stone chimney. A small corral stood empty beside it, and a stream gurgled nearby. It's beautiful, Rebecca said softly, surprised by the peacefulness of the setting. Grant guided Thunder down the slope toward the cabin. It belonged to an old trapper, died last winter. I found it when I was tracking the Blackwell gang through these parts, and decided it made a good base of operations. When they reached the cabin, Grant dismounted first, then carefully lifted the still sleeping Lily down before helping Rebecca. Her legs wobbled after the long ride, and his hands lingered at her waist to steady her. Thank you, she murmured, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Grant cleared his throat and stepped back. Let me get Thunder settled, then I'll show you inside. Rebecca watched as he led the horse to the corral, unsaddled him, and provided water and feed. There was a gentle competence in his movements that reassured her. When he returned, he carried their saddle bags over one shoulder and the still sleeping Lily in his arms. The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable, a main room with a fireplace, a rough-hewn table with chairs, and a small kitchen area. 2 doors led off from the main room. Bedrooms through there, Grant indicated with a nod. You and Lily can take it. I'll sleep out here. Rebecca followed as he carried Lily into the bedroom and gently laid her on the bed. The child stirred but didn't wake, curling onto her side with a soft sigh. Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead, overwhelmed by how close they had come to disaster. When she turned, Grant was watching them from the doorway, an unreadable expression on his face. You must be hungry, he said. I don't have much, but I can make some coffee and fry up some bacon and beans. Rebecca suddenly realized she hadn't eaten since the previous day. That sounds wonderful. Can I help? Grant shook his head. Rest a bit. I'll call you when it's ready. Left alone with her sleeping daughter, Rebecca took the opportunity to properly look around the room. It was sparsely furnished with the bed, a small chest of drawers, and a chair by the window. On top of the chest stood a framed photograph of a young woman with a man and small boy, Grant's sister and her family, Rebecca guessed. She felt a pang of sympathy for the marshal, understanding now the depth of his determination to bring the Blackwell gang to justice. The aroma of coffee and cooking bacon soon filled the cabin, and Rebecca's stomach growled in response. She checked on Lily once more before joining Grant in the main room. He moved efficiently around the small kitchen area, his large frame somehow not seeming out of place in the domestic setting. He had removed his coat and hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Without the shadow of his hat brim, Rebecca could see his face more clearly, strong features, a day's worth of stubble darkening his jaw, and those intense gray eyes that missed nothing. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the table where he'd set out tin plates and cups. Rebecca obeyed, watching as he brought over a pot of coffee and a pan of bacon and beans. It was simple fare, but her hunger made it seem like a feast. "Thank you," she said as he filled her plate. "For everything. You saved our lives today." Grant sat across from her, his expression serious. "Riley Blackwell is still out there, and he won't give up easily. You and your daughter aren't safe yet. What will we do?" Rebecca asked, her appetite suddenly diminishing at the reminder of the danger they still faced. "I've been collecting evidence against Blackwell for months, witness statements, records of his crimes. There's a federal judge coming through Cedar Junction in 2 weeks. If I can get you there to testify about what happened to your husband, along with the evidence I've gathered, we can put Blackwell away for good." 2 weeks, Rebecca repeated, the time stretching before her like an eternity. "Can we stay hidden that long? This place is remote." "Few people know about it. We'll be careful." Grant's eyes met hers across the table. "I gave you my word, Rebecca. I'll keep you both safe." Something in the way he said her name made her heart flutter unexpectedly. Rebecca dropped her gaze to her plate, confused by her reaction to this man she barely knew. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the events of the day catching up with Rebecca as exhaustion settled deep in her bones. She stifled a yawn behind her hand. "You should get some rest," Grant said, noticing her fatigue. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what supplies we need and make a plan." Rebecca nodded and stood, gathering their empty plates. "At least let me help clean up." Grant took the dishes from her hands, his fingers brushing against hers. "I've got this. Go be with your daughter." Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "Good night, Marshal Grant," he corrected. "Just Grant." "Good night, Grant," she said softly and retreated to the bedroom. Lily was still sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling in the even rhythm of deep slumber. Rebecca changed into her nightgown, one of the few possessions she'd managed to grab before fleeing her home, and slipped into the bed beside her daughter. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she replayed the day's events in her mind. Thomas was gone, their home abandoned, and she and Lily were fugitives, dependent on the protection of a man she'd met mere hours ago. Yet somehow, in the midst of this chaos, Rebecca felt safer than she had in months. There was something about Grant Reynolds, his quiet strength, his unwavering resolve, the gentleness with which he'd treated Lily that inspired trust. As Rebecca finally drifted toward sleep, the last thing she remembered was the sound of Grant moving quietly around the cabin, standing guard over them through the night. The next morning, Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the delicious smell of breakfast cooking. Lily was already awake beside her, playing quietly with a small wooden horse that Rebecca didn't recognize. "Good morning, sweetheart," Rebecca said, pulling her daughter close for a hug. "Where did you get that lovely horse?" "The man gave it to me," Lily answered, her voice still shy. "He said it's like thunder but littler." Rebecca smiled, touched by the marshal's thoughtfulness. "That was very kind of him. Shall we go thank him?" Lily nodded, slipping her small hand into Rebecca's as they made their way to the main room. Grant stood at the stove, frying eggs. He had shaved, Rebecca noticed, and changed into a clean shirt. He looked up as they entered, a smile transforming his usually stern features. "Good morning," he greeted them. "Hope you both slept well." "We did, thank you," Rebecca replied. "And thank you for the horse. Lily loves it." Grant's smile widened as he looked at the little girl. "I carved it a while back. Thought you might like it." "It looks like thunder," Lily said, her voice a little stronger now. "That's right," Grant agreed. "Maybe later you can help me feed the real thunder." Lily's eyes lit up at the prospect, and Rebecca felt a rush of gratitude for this man who seemed to instinctively know how to put her daughter at ease. "Breakfast is almost ready," Grant said. "There's water heated for washing up if you'd like." Rebecca thanked him and helped Lily wash before they sat down to breakfast. The domestic scene felt strangely comfortable, as if they'd been sharing meals for years rather than a single day. As they ate, Grant outlined his plan. "I need to ride into the nearest town for supplies, food, ammunition, maybe some clothes for you and Lily. It's about 2 hours each way." Rebecca felt a spike of anxiety at the thought of being left alone. "Is it safe?" "Safer than you coming with me," Grant said. "Blackwell's men will be watching the towns. The cabin is well hidden, and I'll show you where my rifles are kept before I go." He hesitated. "Do you know how to shoot?" Rebecca nodded. "My father taught me. I haven't practiced in years, but I remember the basics." "Good." Grant seemed relieved. "I'll leave my spare revolver with you, just in case. But I don't expect trouble. No one knows about this place except a few friends I trust with my life." After breakfast, Grant gave Rebecca a tour of the cabin's defenses, the loaded rifles strategically placed, the shutters that could be quickly barred, the trapdoor leading to a root cellar that could serve as a hiding place if needed. He showed her how to signal with the lantern if she spotted trouble, and made her promise to stay inside with the doors locked until he returned. "I'll be back before sundown," he assured her, checking his sidearm before holstering it. Rebecca stood in the doorway with Lily as he mounted Thunder. The morning sun caught in his dark hair, and for a moment she was struck by how handsome he was, not in the polished way of city men, but with the weathered, capable attractiveness of a man who knew his place in the world. "Be careful," she called as he turned Thunder toward the trail. Grant tipped his hat to her. "Lock the door behind me," he reminded her, and then he was gone, disappearing into the trees. The day stretched long before Rebecca. To keep busy and take her mind off her worries, she explored the cabin more thoroughly, tidying as she went. She found a shelf of books, mostly practical guides to hunting and survival, but also a few well-worn novels. In a trunk beneath the bed, she discovered children's clothing that must have belonged to Grant's nephew, now tragically deceased. After checking that they were the right size for Lily, Rebecca set them aside, grateful for the providence. Outside, within the safety of the small clearing around the cabin, Rebecca let Lily run and play, burning off the energy of childhood that couldn't be contained even in times of danger. Rebecca kept a watchful eye on the surrounding forest. The revolver Grant had left her tucked securely in the pocket of her skirt. As promised, Grant returned before sundown, Thunder's saddlebags laden with supplies. Rebecca felt a disproportionate relief at seeing him ride into the clearing, unharmed and steady in the saddle. "Any trouble?" she asked as he dismounted. Grant shook his head. Town was quiet. No sign of Blackwell's men, but folks are talking about the shooting at the church. The sheriff in Willow Creek sent out word about the Blackwell gang. He began unloading the saddlebags. "I got flour, sugar, coffee, some dried goods, ammunition for the rifles, and these," he handed Rebecca a bundle wrapped in brown paper. Inside she found fabric for dresses, a small sewing kit, and a pair of sturdy boots that looked to be her size. The general store had a section of ready-made clothing, Grant explained, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I guessed at the sizes." "If they don't fit, they're perfect," Rebecca interrupted, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you." Over the next few days they settled into a routine at the cabin. Grant spent mornings hunting or checking his traps, bringing back rabbits or the occasional wild turkey for their meals. Rebecca took over the cooking and cleaning, grateful to have useful tasks to occupy her hands and mind. In the afternoons, Grant often took Lily to the corral to visit Thunder or down to the stream to fish, giving Rebecca time to sew new clothes from the fabric he'd provided. On the fourth day, as Rebecca was kneading dough for bread, Grant returned from checking his perimeter traps with a troubled expression. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, wiping flour from her hands. "Probably nothing," he said, but his frown didn't ease. "Found some tracks about a mile east of here. Could be trappers or hunters, but it could be Blackwell's men," Rebecca finished, her stomach clenching with fear. Grant nodded grimly. "I'm going to scout further out, see if I can determine who's moving through the area." "Is there anything I should do?" Rebecca asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Grant crossed the room to stand before her, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. The weight was reassuring rather than restricting. "Just stay alert. Keep the rifle close. If I'm not back by nightfall, you will be," Rebecca said firmly, unwilling to consider the alternative. Grant's eyes searched hers for a long moment, and Rebecca was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his hands through the fabric of her dress. "Rebecca," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say. Finally, he squeezed her shoulders gently and stepped back. "I'll be back as soon as I can." After he left, Rebecca found it hard to concentrate on her tasks. She kept Lily close, jumping at every sound from the forest. By late afternoon, her nerves were stretched thin, and she had taken to pacing by the window, watching for Grant's return. When she finally spotted him emerging from the trees, Rebecca rushed to the door, relief washing over her. But as he drew closer, she saw that he was limping, one hand pressed to his side. "Grant," she gasped, hurrying to meet him. "What happened?" "Ran into two of Blackwell's scouts," he said through gritted teeth. "Took care of them, but one got a shot off before I could stop him." Rebecca slipped under his arm to support him as they made their way to the cabin. "Lily," she called, "bring clean cloths and water from the kitchen, quickly." Once inside, Rebecca helped Grant to a chair and carefully removed his coat. The left side of his shirt was soaked with blood, and Rebecca had to steel herself against the sight. "It's not as bad as it looks," Grant assured her as she began unbuttoning his shirt. "Bullet grazed my ribs. Hurts like hell, but it didn't go in." Rebecca worked quickly, cleaning the wound with water and whiskey from Grant's supplies, then bandaging it tightly. Her hands moved with a confidence she didn't entirely feel, but the need to help him overrode her anxiety. "You've done this before," Grant observed, watching her work. "My father was a doctor," Rebecca explained, securing the bandage. "I assisted him sometimes, never with gunshot wounds, though." Grant managed a pained smile. "You're doing fine." Lily had been watching from a safe distance, her blue eyes wide with concern. Now she approached cautiously. "Are you hurt bad?" she asked Grant. "No, little one," he assured her. "Your mama is fixing me right up. I'll be good as new in no time." Lily seemed relieved, and Rebecca was struck by how attached her daughter had become to Grant in such a short time. The feeling was clearly mutual. Grant's expression softened whenever he looked at Lily, and he never seemed to tire of her questions or her childish games. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Rebecca sat with Grant by the fire. He was pale from blood loss and pain, but had refused the bed, insisting he was comfortable enough in his chair. "Those men," Rebecca began hesitantly. "Do you think they found the cabin?" Grant shook his head. "No, I intercepted them about 5 miles from here. They were searching, but hadn't found anything yet." He shifted, wincing at the movement. "But it means Blackwell is getting closer. We may need to move soon." Rebecca's heart sank. She had come to feel safe in this remote cabin with its sturdy walls and the protective presence of the marshal. The thought of being on the run again, especially with Grant injured, filled her with dread. "Where would we go?" she asked. I have a friend, an old Army scout named Jackson, who has a place about 30 miles from here. It's even more remote than this cabin. We could head there until it's time to go to Cedar Junction." Rebecca nodded, accepting the necessity. "When do we leave?" "Day after tomorrow, if I'm strong enough to ride by then," Grant decided. "I need to rest tomorrow, let this wound start healing." "Then that's what we'll do," Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. "You rest, and I'll prepare for the journey." Grant studied her face in the firelight, his expression unreadable. "You're a remarkable woman, Rebecca Nelson. Most people would have fallen apart after what you've been through." Rebecca felt a flush rise to her cheeks at his praise. "I don't have the luxury of falling apart. Lily needs me to be strong." "It's more than that," Grant insisted. "I've seen plenty of parents in danger with their children. Few have your courage or your resilience." "I'm terrified most of the time," Rebecca admitted softly. "That's what makes your courage real," Grant said, his voice equally quiet. "Facing your fear, not the absence of it." Their eyes met across the small space between them, and Rebecca felt something shift in the air. Grant reached across and took her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "Try to get some sleep," he said after a moment. "Tomorrow will be busy." Rebecca nodded and reluctantly withdrew her hand. "Good night, Grant." "Good night, Rebecca." As she lay in bed that night, Rebecca found her thoughts consumed not by fear of Blackwell's men, but by the marshal in the next room. She barely knew him, yet in less than a week, he had become someone she trusted implicitly. More than that, she was beginning to care for him in a way that both excited and terrified her. It was too soon after Thomas's death to be thinking this way, she told herself sternly. And yet the feelings persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. The next morning, Rebecca woke early and slipped quietly into the main room. Grant was asleep in his chair, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, his breathing even but shallow. In sleep, the lines of vigilance eased from his face, making him look younger and more vulnerable. Rebecca moved silently to check on the fire, adding more wood to take the chill off the morning air. As she straightened, she found Grant watching her, his gray eyes alert despite his just-woken state. "How are you feeling?" she asked, moving to his side. "Better than I expected," he replied, though he grimaced as he shifted in the chair. "Help me up." Rebecca offered her arm, and Grant used it to steady himself as he rose to his feet. She could feel the heat of his body through his shirt, the solid strength of him even in his injured state. "Let me check your bandage," she said, helping him to sit at the table. Grant submitted to her ministrations without complaint, watching her face as she carefully removed the old bandage and examined the wound. It looked angry and red but showed no signs of infection, much to Rebecca's relief. "Good," she pronounced, applying a fresh bandage. "But you need to take it easy today. Doctor's orders." A small smile curved Grant's lips. "Yes, madam." True to his word, Grant spent most of the day resting, though Rebecca could see how the inactivity chafed at him. He cleaned and oiled his guns, explaining to a fascinated Lily how each part worked and the importance of proper maintenance. Later, he taught her a card game that had her giggling with delight when she won. Rebecca busied herself with preparations for their journey, mending clothes, packing food that would travel well, and sorting through the cabin's supplies to determine what they should take with them. All the while, she was acutely aware of Grant's presence, the deep timbre of his voice as he spoke to Lily, the way his eyes followed her movements around the cabin. That evening, after they had eaten a simple supper of stew, Grant beckoned Rebecca to join him by the fire. Lily had already fallen asleep, worn out by the day's excitement despite their confinement to the cabin. "Tell me about yourself," Grant said as Rebecca settled into the chair opposite his. Before all this happened, Rebecca hesitated, unused to talking about herself. There's not much to tell. I grew up in St. Louis, the only child of a doctor and his wife. My mother died when I was 15. After that, it was just father and me until I met Thomas. How did you meet him? He came to my father for treatment a broken wrist from a fall. He was charming, full of stories about his adventures out west. Rebecca smiled sadly at the memory. Father didn't approve. He thought Thomas was too reckless, too fond of gambling, but I was 20 and thought I knew better. You loved him, Grant said, not a question but a statement. I did, Rebecca acknowledged. At first, our life together was everything I'd dreamed. We came west, settled in Willow Creek. Thomas worked odd jobs while looking for something more permanent. Then Lily came along and... She paused, memories of those early, happy days bittersweet now. Things changed after Lily was born. Thomas became restless. The gambling started again, then the drinking. He'd be gone for days at a time. I'm sorry, Grant said softly. You deserved better. Rebecca shook her head. I made my choice. And despite everything, Thomas gave me Lily. I can never regret that. Grant was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the fire. What will you do after, when this is all over? It was a question Rebecca had been avoiding. I don't know, she admitted. I can't go back to Willow Creek. Too many memories and people will talk. My father passed away 2 years ago, so St. Louis holds nothing for me now. You could start fresh somewhere, Grant suggested. You're young, educated. You could make a good life for yourself and Lily. Perhaps, Rebecca said, though the prospect of facing the world alone with a child to support was daunting. What about you? Will you continue as a marshal after Blackwell is brought to justice? Grant's face grew serious. I don't know. This badge was a means to an end, a way to hunt down the men who killed my sister and her family. I haven't thought much beyond that. What did you do before? You mentioned you had a ranch. A smile touched Grant's lips, genuine and warm. That's right. Small spread in Colorado, about 100 head of cattle. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Good land, good water, room to grow. You loved it, Rebecca observed, seeing the light in his eyes as he spoke of it. I did. Still do, I suppose, though I sold it to finance this hunt. His expression turned wistful. Always thought I'd have a family there someday. Wife, children, build something that would last. The image his words conjured was so vivid Rebecca could almost see it, Grant on horseback, riding the boundaries of his land. Children running to meet him as he returned home. A woman herself, her traitorous mind supplied, waiting for him on the porch of a ranch house. It's not too late, she said softly. For that dream. Grant's eyes met hers and something unspoken passed between them. No, he agreed, his voice equally soft. I suppose it's not. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Grant cleared his throat and sat up straighter, wincing slightly at the movement. We should turn in. Long day tomorrow if we're going to make it to Jackson's place. Rebecca nodded, suddenly shy. Good night, Grant. As she rose to go to the bedroom, Grant caught her hand, stopping her. Rebecca, he said, his voice low and serious. Whatever happens, I want you to know that meeting you and Lily. It's reminded me there's more to life than vengeance. I'm grateful for that. Rebecca squeezed his hand. Too moved to speak, then slipped away to the bedroom, her heart full of emotions she wasn't yet ready to name. Dawn broke clear and cold the next morning, a thin layer of frost coating the ground outside the cabin. Rebecca woke early, anxiety about the journey ahead making rest impossible. She dressed quickly in her sturdiest clothes and went to the main room to find Grant already up, moving around the cabin with purpose despite his injury. How are you feeling? She asked, noting that his movements seemed less stiff than the day before. Well enough to ride, he assured her. Jackson's place is a long journey, but we'll take it slow." They ate a hearty breakfast, then set about loading their supplies onto Thunder. Grant had fashioned a kind of pallet behind his saddle where Lily could ride, secured by a makeshift belt. Rebecca would ride behind him, her arms around his waist for balance. "We'll follow the stream north for about 5 miles, then cut east through the mountains," Grant explained as he checked Thunder's cinch. "There's a pass that few people know about. It'll take us right to Jackson's Valley." Rebecca nodded, trying to memorize the route in case they became separated. Grant seemed to read her thoughts. "We won't get separated," he said firmly. "No matter what happens, we stay together." By mid-morning they were ready to depart. Rebecca took one last look at the cabin that had been their sanctuary. Despite the brevity of their stay, she felt a pang at leaving it behind. "It'll still be here," Grant said, following her gaze, "when this is all over." The implication of his words that they might return together someday hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging it aloud. With Lily settled securely on her pallet and Rebecca mounted behind Grant, they set off, following the bubbling stream as it wound through the forest. The day was perfect for traveling, cool but not cold, with a light breeze that carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. For the first few hours, they made good progress, stopping occasionally to rest Thunder and to allow Lily to stretch her legs. Despite the circumstances, Rebecca found herself enjoying the journey, the majestic scenery of mountains and forests, the warm strength of Grant's back against her chest, the occasional lilting sound of Lily's childish observations. It was nearing midday when Grant suddenly reined Thunder to a halt, his body tensing beneath Rebecca's hands. "What is it?" she whispered, fear clutching at her heart. "Riders," Grant said, his voice barely audible, "coming up from the south." Without another word, he urged Thunder off the trail and into a dense thicket of pines, where they dismounted. Grant quickly unloaded Lily from her pallet and handed her to Rebecca. "Stay here," he instructed, drawing his revolver. "Keep Lily quiet. If anything happens to me, follow the stream north. You'll reach a fork after about 3 miles. Take the eastern branch and keep going until you reach a cabin with a red door. That's Jackson's place." "Grant, no," Rebecca protested, but he was already moving away, crouching low as he made his way back toward the trail. Rebecca pulled Lily close, her hand covering the child's mouth as they huddled behind a fallen log. Minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rebecca strained to hear any sound that would indicate what was happening, but the forest was eerily silent. Then came the crack of gunfire, one shot, then another, followed by the thunder of hooves. Rebecca clutched Lily tighter, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it could be heard over the commotion. "Mama," Lily whimpered against her hand, tears welling in her blue eyes. "SHH, sweetheart," Rebecca soothed, though her own fear threatened to overwhelm her. "We must be very quiet now." The sound of approaching footsteps made Rebecca freeze, her hand instinctively moving to the revolver tucked in her waistband. She was prepared to defend her daughter to the death if necessary. "Rebecca," Grant's voice called softly, and she nearly collapsed with relief. "Here," she answered, standing with Lily in her arms. Grant emerged from the trees, his face grim but unharmed. "Blackwell's men," he confirmed. "2 of them, scouts like the ones I encountered yesterday. I managed to drive them off, but they'll be back with reinforcements." "Did they see which way we went?" Rebecca asked as they hurried back to where Thunder waited. "I don't think so, but we can't risk it. We need to change course." Grant helped Rebecca mount, then handed Lily up to her before swinging into the saddle himself. "We'll head straight east, try to lose them in the higher country." They rode hard for the next hour, the terrain growing steeper and more rugged as they climbed. Thunder was sure-footed, but even he struggled on some of the more treacherous slopes. Grant's injury clearly pained him, though he made no complaint as he guided the horse through the wilderness. By late afternoon, they had reached a high ridge overlooking a vast expanse of forest and mountains. Grant reined in thunder and dismounted, helping Rebecca and Lily down as well. "We'll rest here for a bit," he decided, scanning the landscape below them. "No sign of pursuit, but we can't be too careful." While thunder grazed on the sparse mountain grass, they sat in the shelter of a rocky outcropping and shared the food Rebecca had packed: jerky, hard bread, and dried apples. Lily, exhausted from the tension and the journey, fell asleep against Rebecca's side. "Will we still reach your friend's place today?" Rebecca asked quietly, brushing hair from Lily's forehead. Grant shook his head. "Not now that we've had to change course. We'll need to make camp for the night and continue at first light." Rebecca nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. The thought of spending a night in the open, with Blackwell's men potentially on their trail, was frightening, but she trusted Grant's judgment. "There's a sheltered hollow about half a mile ahead," Grant continued. "I've camped there before. It's defensible, with a small cave for shelter and a spring for water." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they made their way to the hollow Grant had described. It was indeed an ideal spot for a camp, a natural depression in the mountainside, ringed by large boulders that provided protection from the wind and from potential attackers. A small cave, more of a deep overhang really, offered shelter, and a clear spring bubbled nearby. Grant set about making camp with practiced efficiency, despite his injury. He unsaddled Thunder and rubbed the horse down, then gathered wood for a small fire. Rebecca laid out their bedrolls in the cave and prepared a simple meal from their provisions. As darkness fell, they sat close to the fire, Lily once again asleep, this time on Grant's lap. The child had insisted on sitting with him during dinner, and he had accommodated her with a tenderness that made Rebecca's heart ache. "She trusts you," Rebecca observed softly. Grant looked down at the sleeping child, his expression gentle. "She's an extraordinary little girl. You've done well with her." "She's all I have," Rebecca said, the simple truth of it catching in her throat. Grant's eyes met hers across the fire. "Not anymore," he said quietly. "You have me now, too." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that went beyond their immediate circumstances. Rebecca felt a flush rise to her cheeks, grateful for the dim firelight that would hide it. "I should put her to bed," she said, rising and reaching for Lily. Grant carefully transferred the sleeping child to Rebecca's arms, his hands lingering briefly on her waist as she steadied herself. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cooling night air. After settling Lily on one of the bedrolls in the cave, Rebecca returned to the fire to find Grant adding more wood, his movements careful to avoid aggravating his wound. "You should rest," she said, concerned by the lines of pain etched around his mouth. "Let me take first watch." Grant shook his head. "I'm fine. You need your rest more than I do." "Grant," Rebecca said firmly, "you're injured and exhausted. A few hours of sleep will make you more effective if trouble comes. I know how to use the rifle, and I'll wake you at the first sign of anything unusual." For a moment it seemed he would argue further, but then he sighed, conceding the point. "2 hours," he said. "Then you wake me no matter what, promise?" "I promise," Rebecca agreed, accepting the rifle he handed her. Grant retreated to the cave but positioned himself near the entrance where he could see both Rebecca and Lily. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep, a testament to his exhaustion. Rebecca settled herself on a boulder near the fire, rifle across her knees, and prepared for her vigil. The night was clear, a canopy of stars stretching across the sky. In the distance, She could hear the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Her mind wandered to the journey ahead, to the federal judge in Cedar Junction who might be their salvation, to the uncertain future that lay beyond. And inevitably, her thoughts turned to Grant. In the span of less than a week, this man had become the center of her world, a protector, a companion, and perhaps something more. Rebecca knew she was falling in love with him. The realization should have frightened her. It was too soon after Thomas's death, too fraught with complications. Yet she felt only a sense of rightness, as if her heart had recognized something her mind was only now understanding. Whether Grant felt the same, she couldn't be certain. There had been moments the way his eyes lingered on her face, the gentle touch of his hand, the fierce protectiveness that seemed to go beyond duty. But men like Grant Reynolds, men of honor and purpose, didn't make declarations in the midst of danger. If there was to be anything between them, it would have to wait until Blackwell was brought to justice, and they were both free to choose their paths. A sound from the darkness, a twig snapping, unnaturally loud in the quiet night, brought Rebecca instantly alert. She raised the rifle, her heart pounding as she peered into the gloom beyond the firelight. Nothing moved. No further sounds disturbed the night. After several tense minutes, Rebecca began to think she had imagined it, a trick of her anxious mind. But then she heard it again, a definite rustling from the underbrush to her left. Silently, Rebecca moved to wake Grant, shaking his shoulder gently. He came awake instantly, his hand closing around her wrist as his eyes flew open. "Someone's out there," she whispered, and he nodded, releasing her to reach for his revolver. "Stay with Lily," he murmured, rising to a crouch. "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, take her and head east. Keep the North Star on your left shoulder." Before Rebecca could protest, Grant was gone, slipping into the darkness beyond the fire's glow. She retreated to the cave, positioning herself at the entrance with the rifle ready, Lily's sleeping form just behind her. The minutes stretched endlessly, each second a lifetime of fear and uncertainty. Rebecca's finger rested lightly on the rifle's trigger, her breath coming in shallow, silent gasps. A shadow moved at the edge of the firelight. Rebecca took aim, her heart hammering against her ribs. "It's me," Grant's voice came softly, and she lowered the rifle in relief. He emerged into the circle of light, and to her surprise, he wasn't alone. A man followed him, tall and lean, with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors. "Rebecca," Grant said, "this is Jackson, my friend I told you about." "Madam," the newcomer greeted her with a respectful nod. "Sorry if I gave you a fright. Been tracking you since sundown." "Jackson," Rebecca repeated, confusion evident in her voice. "But I thought we were going to your place." "We are," Jackson confirmed. "But when you didn't show up by noon like Grant's message said, I figured something had gone wrong, came looking for you." Rebecca turned to Grant. "You sent him a message. When?" "Yesterday, before we left the cabin," Grant explained. "I have a system of markers and drops that Jackson and I use to communicate. Left word that we were coming and the route we planned to take." "Good thing, too," Jackson added, settling by the fire. "Blackwell's gang is swarming all over these mountains." Counted at least 8 men in different search parties. Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "How did they find us?" "Someone in town must have talked," Grant said grimly. "Mentioned I was asking about supplies for a woman and child." "We need to move," Jackson said, poking at the fire. "My place isn't safe now, too obvious, but I know somewhere they won't look. Old mining claim up in the high country. Abandoned years ago, but the cabin's still sound. We can hold out there until it's time to head to Cedar Junction." Grant nodded, accepting his friend's judgment. "How far?" "Day's ride, maybe less if we push hard." Jackson glanced at Lily, still sleeping peacefully. Might be rough going for the little one, though. She's stronger than she looks, Rebecca said, her chin lifting slightly. We'll manage. Jackson studied her for a moment, then nodded approvingly. Reckon you will at that, madam. He turned to Grant. You picked a good one this time, Reynolds. Grant cleared his throat, clearly embarrassed. We should get some rest. Dawn comes early in these mountains. Jackson volunteered to take the watch, allowing Grant and Rebecca to sleep. Despite her exhaustion, Rebecca found it hard to settle, her mind racing with all that had happened and all that still lay ahead. Eventually, though, she drifted into a fitful slumber, lulled by the steady breathing of her daughter and the knowledge that they were, for the moment, safe. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, with a hint of frost in the air that spoke of the higher elevations they would soon be traversing. They broke camp quickly, with Jackson taking the lead on his own horse, a sturdy bay gelding. Grant, Rebecca, and Lily followed on Thunder, moving at a brisk pace through forests that gradually gave way to rockier terrain. Jackson proved to be a taciturn but not unfriendly companion. Throughout the day's journey, he pointed out landmarks and shared bits of knowledge about the mountain country they traversed. Rebecca learned that he had been an Army scout for nearly 20 years before retiring to his cabin in the wilderness. He and Grant had met during Grant's early days as a marshal, when Jackson had helped him track a gang of horse thieves. Best tracker I ever knew, Grant told Rebecca as they rode. Taught me most of what I know about reading sign and moving unseen through country like this. High praise coming from you, Rebecca observed, having seen Grant's own considerable skills. They made good time, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch of jerky and hardtack. Lily, who had been subdued in the morning, warmed to Jackson after he carved her a small wooden whistle from a twig during their lunch break. By late afternoon, they had climbed well into the mountains, the air noticeably thinner and cooler. The trail they followed, barely discernible as such to Rebecca's untrained eye, wound through a series of narrow passes and along precipitous ridges that made her clutch Grant more tightly around the waist. Almost there, Jackson called back as they rounded a bend in the trail. Just over that rise. The mining cabin appeared suddenly as they crested the hill, a sturdy structure built of logs and stone, nestled against the mountainside in a small, sheltered valley. A stream tumbled down one side of the valley, and patches of late wildflowers added color to the otherwise austere landscape. Not much to look at, Jackson admitted as they dismounted in front of the cabin, but it's solid, and no one comes up here anymore. Mine played out 30 years ago. Inside, the cabin was simple but surprisingly comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a rough table and chairs, and bunks built into one wall. A lean-to at the back served as a storage area and kitchen. There's a root cellar out back, Jackson explained as they unloaded their supplies. Stocked it last fall with preserves and such. Should be enough to see us through until it's time to head to Cedar Junction. For the next several days, they settled into a routine at the mining cabin. Jackson and Grant took turns patrolling the surrounding area, always careful to avoid leaving obvious tracks. Rebecca kept busy with domestic tasks, cooking, cleaning, mending clothes, while keeping a watchful eye on Lily, who had taken to following Jackson around whenever he was in the cabin, fascinated by his stories of Army days and frontier life. On the fourth evening, after Lily had been put to bed in the small alcove Jackson had partitioned off for them, Rebecca joined the men by the fire. The nights were growing colder as autumn deepened, and the warmth of the flames was welcome. "How much longer until we need to leave for Cedar Junction?" she asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Grant. "Judge is due there in 5 days," Grant replied. It's a 2-day ride from here, so we should leave in 3 days. Jackson nodded agreement. Weather looks to be holding. Shouldn't have any trouble making it in time. And after, Rebecca couldn't help asking. After I testify and Blackwell is brought to justice. What then? The question hung in the air, addressed to both men but meant primarily for Grant. He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. That depends on you, Rebecca, he said finally, his voice low. On what you want for yourself and Lily. Jackson cleared his throat and stood. Think I'll check on the horses one more time before turning in, he said, tactfully giving them privacy. After the door closed behind him, silence stretched between Rebecca and Grant, filled only by the crackling of the fire and the soft whine of wind outside the cabin walls. What I want, Rebecca began hesitantly, is a safe place for Lily to grow up. A home. She paused, gathering her courage. And I want you to be part of that if you're willing. Grant's head came up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Rebecca, he said, his voice rough with emotion, these past 10 days have been the strangest of my life. I set out to avenge my sister and instead I found. He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. What? Rebecca prompted softly. What did you find? A reason to live beyond vengeance, Grant said, moving to kneel before her chair. A woman of extraordinary courage and grace. A child who has somehow wound her way around my heart. He took Rebecca's hands in his. I know it's too soon. You're still grieving Thomas and we're in the middle of danger, and there are 1,000 reasons why this is madness. And yet, Rebecca's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he must hear it. And yet I love you, Grant said simply. I want to build a life with you and Lily if you'll have me. Not now, not in the midst of all this, but afterward, when you've had time to be certain. Tears sprang to Rebecca's eyes, unexpected but welcome. I am certain, she whispered. I think I've been certain since that first day in the church when you promised to keep us safe. Grant's hands tightened on hers. Is that a yes? Rebecca nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. Yes. Grant rose, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. His kiss was gentle at first, a question, an offering. Then, as Rebecca responded, it deepened into something more urgent, a promise of all that lay ahead for them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Grant rested his forehead against hers. When this is over, he promised, I'll take you and Lily back to Colorado. I know a piece of land not far from my old ranch. Good water, good grazing, room to build a home, raise a family. I'd like that, Rebecca said, her heart full to bursting. Very much. They might have stayed that way longer, wrapped in each other's arms and in the promise of their future, but the cabin door opened as Jackson returned. Sorry to interrupt, he said, though his weathered face showed more amusement than contrition, but we've got company coming. Grant instantly shifted from lover to protector, releasing Rebecca but keeping her close to his side. Blackwell's men, Jackson nodded grimly. Spotted a group of riders coming up the east trail. 6, maybe 7 of them. Riley Blackwell himself is leading them. How did they find us? Rebecca gasped, fear clutching at her heart. Doesn't matter now, Grant said, already moving to check his weapons. What matters is getting you and Lily to Cedar Junction safely. There's a back way out of the valley, Jackson said. Narrow trail that leads down to the western slope. Not easy traveling, especially in the dark, but it's our best chance. Grant nodded, his face set in determined lines. How much time do we have? An hour, maybe less. That's enough. Grant turned to Rebecca. Pack only what we absolutely need. Warm clothes for you and Lily, food that doesn't need cooking, the water canteens. Rebecca nodded, already moving to gather their things. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the tasks at hand. As she packed, she could hear Grant and Jackson discussing strategy in low, urgent tones. "I'll stay behind," Jackson was saying. "Buy you some time. Make them think you're still here." "Too dangerous," Grant argued. "Blackwell won't take prisoners." "Not planning on being taken," Jackson retorted. "Just need to delay them long enough for you three to get clear. I know these mountains better than any of them. Once I've led them on a merry chase, I'll circle back and meet you at the rendezvous point we discussed." Rebecca finished packing their meager belongings and moved to the alcove to wake Lily. The child stirred sleepily, confused by the urgency of being awakened in the middle of the night. "We need to go on another adventure, sweetheart," Rebecca explained softly, helping Lily into her warmest clothes. "We need to be very quiet and brave, just like before." Lily nodded, her small face serious in the dim light. "Is the bad man coming again?" "Yes, but Mr. Jackson and Marshal Reynolds will protect us," Rebecca assured her, though her own heart was pounding with fear. When they emerged from the alcove, Grant and Jackson had finished their preparations. The cabin was arranged to look as if they had just stepped out, temporarily, fire still burning, coffee pot on the hearth. "Ready?" Grant asked, his eyes searching Rebecca's face. She nodded, holding Lily's hand tightly. "Ready." They slipped out the back door of the cabin into the cold mountain night. The moon was a slim crescent, providing just enough light to see by without illuminating them too clearly. Jackson led the way, with Grant bringing up the rear, constantly scanning for any sign of pursuit. The trail Jackson had mentioned was barely more than a game path, winding treacherously along the edge of the valley wall. Rebecca carried Lily, the child's arms wrapped tightly around her neck, as they made their way down the steep incline. After about half an hour of careful descent, they reached a small plateau where 3 horses were tethered, Thunder and Jackson's bay, plus a sturdy pony Rebecca hadn't seen before. "Had him stashed as a spare," Jackson explained when he saw her questioning look. "You'll ride him. Easier for you to manage on your own than Thunder, and he's sure-footed on mountain trails." Rebecca's heart sank. "You're not coming with us now." Jackson shook his head. "Need to go back, set things up for our friends." He handed her the pony's reins. "Head west along this trail until you reach a fork. Take the north branch and follow it down to the river. There's a ford about 5 miles downstream. Cross there and continue north. You'll reach the stage road by morning. Follow it east to Cedar Junction." Rebecca felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you, Jackson, for everything." The old scout looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just doing what needs doing, madam." He turned to Grant. "Take care of them, Reynolds." Grant clasped his friend's hand. "You be careful, don't take any unnecessary risks." Jackson's weathered face creased in a smile. "Never do." With a final nod to Rebecca and a gentle touch to Lily's head, Jackson turned and headed back up the trail, disappearing quickly into the darkness. Grant helped Rebecca mount the pony, then lifted Lily up to sit in front of her. After checking that they were secure, he swung up onto Thunder. "Stay close," he instructed, "and if I give the signal to ride hard, don't hesitate." They set off along the trail, moving as quickly as caution would allow. The path was treacherous in places, winding along cliff edges and through dense stands of pine where branches whipped at their faces. Lily, initially frightened, soon fell asleep against Rebecca's chest, lulled by the rhythm of the pony's careful steps. They had been traveling for perhaps 2 hours when the sound of gunfire echoed from the direction of the cabin. Rebecca jerked her head up, her heart in her throat. "Jackson," she whispered. Grant's face was grim in the moonlight. He knew what he was doing. "The best thing we can do now is keep moving." They pressed on through the night, the trail gradually becoming less steep as they descended from the mountains. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, they had reached the river. Jackson had mentioned a broad, swift-flowing expanse of water that gleamed silver in the early light. "We'll rest here briefly," Grant decided, helping Rebecca and Lily dismount. "The horses need water and we all need food." They settled on the riverbank, sharing dried meat and hardtack. Lily, now fully awake, watched the river with fascination, pointing out fish that darted in the shallows. Despite the danger of their situation, Rebecca found herself storing away these moments, her daughter's delight, Grant's protective presence, the beauty of the wilderness around them. "How much further to Cedar Junction?" she asked as they prepared to move on. "If we make good time, we should reach it by nightfall tomorrow," Grant replied, studying the sky. "Weather's holding, which is in our favor." They forded the river without incident, though the water was cold enough to make Rebecca gasp as it reached her knees. On the far side, they picked up a more established trail that wound through rolling foothills, gradually descending toward the plains beyond. By midday, they had reached the stage road, a wide, rutted track that stretched east and west as far as the eye could see. Grant seemed to relax slightly once they were on it. "We'll make better time now," he said, "and there's a way station about 10 miles ahead where we can rest properly." The way station turned out to be a crude but comfortable structure, a combination stable, inn, and trading post that served travelers on the stage route. The proprietor, a gruff man named Henson, eyed them curiously, but asked no questions when Grant paid for a room and hot meals. After a simple but satisfying dinner, Rebecca gave Lily a much-needed bath in the tin tub the proprietor's wife provided, then tucked her into one of the narrow beds in their small room. The child was asleep almost instantly, exhausted from the journey. Grant had gone to check on the horses and to inquire about any travelers who had passed through recently, particularly any who might be Blackwell's men. When he returned to their room, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "No sign of Blackwell or his gang," he reported. "And a stage came through heading east about 6 hours ago. Henson says it was nearly empty, just the driver, shotgun rider, and one passenger. If we leave at first light, we'll reach Cedar Junction well ahead of the judge's arrival." Rebecca sank onto the edge of the bed, relief making her limbs weak. "Do you think Jackson got away?" Grant sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "If anyone could, it's Jackson. He's survived worse situations." Rebecca leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I'm so tired of running, Grant, of being afraid." "I know," he said softly, his arm going around her shoulders. "It won't be much longer. Once you've given your testimony and the judge issues warrants for the rest of the gang, the marshals in 3 territories will be hunting them. You and Lily will be safe." Rebecca turned her face up to his. "And you, will you be safe?" Grant's expression softened as he looked down at her. "I plan to be extremely cautious. I have too much to live for now." He kissed her then, a gentle kiss full of promise. Rebecca returned it, her hands coming up to frame his face, feeling the slight roughness of stubble beneath her palms. When they broke apart, Grant rested his forehead against hers. "I should let you rest," he said, though he made no move to release her. "Stay," Rebecca said softly. "Just hold me tonight. I don't want to be alone." Grant nodded, understanding in his eyes. They lay down on the narrow bed, fully clothed, with Lily sleeping peacefully on the other bed across the small room. Grant's arm circled Rebecca's waist, pulling her close against him, her head tucked beneath his chin. "Sleep now," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you, both of you." Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling truly safe for the first time in days. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she allowed herself to rest in the arms of the man she loved. They left the way station at dawn, well rested and provisioned for the final leg of their journey. The day was clear and warm, perfect for traveling, and they made good time along the stage road. By mid-afternoon, they could see Cedar Junction in the distance, a substantial town that served as a hub for the surrounding ranches and farms. "The judge isn't due until tomorrow," Grant told Rebecca as they approached the town, "but I want to get you settled and make contact with the local sheriff. He's been notified to expect us." Cedar Junction proved to be larger and more civilized than Willow Creek, with several streets of proper buildings, including a courthouse, a bank, and a two-story hotel. Grant led them directly to the hotel, where he secured a room for Rebecca and Lily and another for himself. "Wait here," he instructed after seeing them settled. "I'll go speak with the sheriff and make arrangements for tomorrow. The hotel dining room serves supper at 6. I'll meet you there." After he left, Rebecca helped Lily wash up and change into the cleanest clothes they had. The child seemed to understand the importance of making a good impression, standing patiently as Rebecca brushed her hair and tied it back with a ribbon salvaged from their hasty packing. "Are the bad men gone now, Mama?" Lily asked as Rebecca smoothed her dress. Rebecca hesitated, not wanting to frighten her daughter but unwilling to lie. "Not yet, sweetheart, but Marshal Reynolds is making sure they can't hurt us anymore, and tomorrow I'm going to talk to an important judge who will help us too." Lily nodded solemnly. "And then we can go home with Marshal Reynolds." The question caught Rebecca by surprise. "Would you like that, to have a home with Marshal Reynolds?" Lily nodded again, more enthusiastically. "He makes you smile, Mama, and he tells good stories. And he promised to teach me to ride a horse when I'm bigger." Rebecca felt a rush of love for her perceptive child. "Yes, after tomorrow we'll find a new home with Marshal Reynolds. How does that sound?" "Good," Lily said decisively, and returned to playing with the wooden horse Grant had given her what seemed like a lifetime ago. When they went down to the dining room that evening, Grant was waiting for them, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He stood as they approached, his eyes warming at the sight of them. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and Rebecca felt herself blush like a girl. Over supper, Grant explained what would happen the next day. "The judge arrives on the morning stage. He'll convene court at 11. The sheriff will escort you to the courthouse, where you'll give your testimony about what happened to Thomas and what you witnessed of the Blackwell gang's activities." Rebecca nodded, a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "Will Riley Blackwell be there?" "No," Grant assured her. "This is just to establish the facts and issue warrants. Blackwell will be arrested based on those warrants, then brought to trial separately." "And after I testify?" Rebecca asked. "Then we're free to go," Grant said, his eyes holding hers, "to start our new life." The words sent a thrill of anticipation through Rebecca, tempered with caution. "Will it really be that simple?" Grant's expression sobered. "I won't lie to you, Rebecca. Riley Blackwell is still out there, and he's not a man who forgives or forgets. But with federal warrants issued, every lawman in the territory will be looking for him, and I don't intend to make it easy for him to find us." After supper, they took a short walk through the town, Lily between them, holding their hands. To casual observers, they must have looked like any ordinary family enjoying an evening stroll. Rebecca cherished the illusion, allowing herself to imagine that the danger was already behind them. Back at the hotel, Grant saw them to their room, lingering in the doorway. "Try to get some rest," he advised. "Tomorrow will be a long day." "You too," Rebecca said, reluctant to see him go. "Grant, thank you for everything." He shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "No thanks needed, not between us." He leaned in to brush a gentle kiss against her cheek. "Good night, Rebecca." "Good night, Lily." "Night, Marshal," Lily replied sleepily from where she sat on the bed. After Grant left, Rebecca helped Lily prepare for bed, then lay beside her, listening to the sounds of the hotel settling for the night. Tomorrow would bring an end to one chapter of their lives and the beginning of another. Rebecca fell asleep with that thought, a smile on her lips despite the challenges that still lay ahead. The morning dawned bright and clear. A good omen, Rebecca decided as she dressed Lily in her best clothes. Her own appearance was a matter of concern. Her dress was wrinkled from travel, and she had no proper hat for a court appearance. But these were trivial matters compared to the importance of her testimony. A knock at the door announced the arrival of breakfast, sent up by Grant. The tray held not only food but also a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, Rebecca found a simple but elegant dress in a soft blue color, along with a matching ribbon for her hair. A note in Grant's strong handwriting read, "Thought you might want something fresh for today. The shopkeeper's wife helped me choose the size. See you at the courthouse. G." Tears sprang to Rebecca's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. The dress fit nearly perfectly, a little loose in the waist, but otherwise as if it had been made for her. With her hair neatly arranged and secured with the ribbon, Rebecca felt more prepared to face the day's challenges. At 10:30, the sheriff arrived to escort them to the courthouse, a burly, red-faced man named Sheriff Tanner, who treated Lily with unexpected gentleness, admiring her wooden horse and offering her a peppermint stick from his pocket. The courthouse was already busy when they arrived, with various townspeople gathered to watch the proceedings. Grant met them at the entrance, his expression both proud and protective as he saw Rebecca in the new dress. "You look lovely," he murmured as he guided them to seats near the front of the courtroom. The judge, a stern-looking man with iron-gray hair and piercing blue eyes, arrived precisely at 11, and the court was called to order. After some preliminary business, Rebecca was called to testify. As she took her seat in the witness chair, Rebecca felt a moment of panic. But then she saw Grant, sitting with Lily on his lap, both of them watching her with complete confidence. Drawing strength from their presence, Rebecca began her testimony. She spoke clearly and concisely, describing Thomas's involvement with the Blackwell gang, the confrontation at their home that had resulted in his murder, and her subsequent flight with Lily. The judge asked several pointed questions, but seemed satisfied with her answers. "And you can identify Riley Blackwell?" he asked finally. "Yes, Your Honor," Rebecca confirmed. "He was the one who shot my husband. I saw him clearly." The judge nodded, making a note on the paper before him. "And these events occurred exactly as you've described them?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Thank you, Mrs. Nelson. You may step down." Grant was the next to testify, providing detailed information about the Blackwell gang's activities across 3 territories, including the massacre at Pine Ridge that had claimed his sister's family. His testimony was professional and dispassionate, but Rebecca could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched when he spoke of his sister. After both testimonies were complete, the judge retired to consider the evidence. The wait seemed interminable, though it was probably no more than 30 minutes before he returned. "Based on the testimony presented today," the judge announced, "I am issuing federal warrants for the arrest of Riley Blackwell and all known members of his gang on charges of murder, robbery, extortion, and various other crimes against the peace and dignity of the United States of America." He fixed Grant with a stern gaze. "Deputy Marshal Reynolds, I expect these warrants to be executed with all due haste." "Yes, Your Honor," Grant replied. "Mrs. Nelson," the judge continued, turning to Rebecca, "the court thanks you for your courage in coming forward. You are free to go, but I must advise you to remain available should your testimony be required at trial." "I understand, Your Honor," Rebecca said, relief flooding through her. As the court adjourned, Grant made his way to Rebecca's side, Lily in his arms. "It's done," he said quietly. "The warrants have been issued. We can leave as soon as we're ready." Rebecca nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Where will we go?" "I've been thinking about that," Grant said as they left the courthouse. "There's a town called Silver Creek about 100 miles from here, near that land I mentioned. It's small but growing. They need a marshal and the position comes with a house." He looked at her questioningly. "What do you think?" "I think it sounds perfect," Rebecca replied, her heart full. They returned to the hotel to gather their belongings, planning to depart the following morning. Grant had arranged for a wagon to transport them and their few possessions, as well as a proper saddle for Thunder, who would be tied behind. That evening they celebrated with a special dinner in the hotel dining room. Lily, dressed in her best, behaved like a perfect little lady, earning smiles from the other diners. Rebecca, still wearing the blue dress Grant had given her, felt a happiness she had thought might never be hers again. As they finished their meal, Grant reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, which he placed on the table between them. It was a ring, a simple gold band with a small, perfect pearl. "I know it's soon," he said, his eyes never leaving Rebecca's face, "and if you want to wait, I'll understand. But I want you to know that my intentions are honorable and permanent." He took a deep breath. "Rebecca Nelson, will you marry me?" Rebecca felt tears well in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Grant Reynolds." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit as if made for her. Across the table, Lily clapped her hands in delight. "Are you my papa now?" she asked innocently. Grant's expression softened as he looked at the child. "If you want me to be, and if your mother agrees, I would be honored to be your papa." "I want you to," Lily declared with the simple certainty of childhood. Rebecca reached across the table to take Grant's hand, her heart too full for words. This man who had saved them, protected them, and loved them was now going to be her husband, Lily's father. It was more than she had dared to hope for when she had fled Willow Creek with her daughter just 2 weeks ago. The next morning they left Cedar Junction in the wagon Grant had procured, their few possessions packed securely. The journey to Silver Creek would take several days, but Rebecca didn't mind. Each mile took them further from danger and closer to their new life together. On the 3rd day of their journey, as they stopped to water the horses at a small creek, a rider approached from the east. Rebecca felt a moment of alarm until the figure drew close enough to recognize. "Jackson!" she exclaimed as the old scout reined in beside them. He tipped his hat to her, a rare smile creasing his weathered face. "Madam, little one." His eyes moved to Grant. "Figured I'd find you on this trail." Grant clasped his friend's hand warmly. "Glad to see you made it out. We were worried." Jackson dismounted, accepting the cup of coffee Rebecca offered him. "Blackwell and his boys gave me a good chase, but I know those mountains better than they ever will. Lost them in a box canyon, then doubled back." He sipped the coffee appreciatively. "Heard in town that the judge issued the warrants. Blackwell's running scared now." "Good," Grant said grimly. "The territorial marshals have been notified. They'll find him eventually." "Expect they will," Jackson agreed. He glanced at Rebecca's hand, noting the ring on her finger. "See you two work things out." Rebecca smiled, leaning slightly against Grant's side. "We did." "Where are you headed?" Grant asked his friend. "Thought I might ride along with you to Silver Creek," Jackson said casually. "Here they need a good livery stable owner, might settle down for a spell." Grant's eyes widened in surprise. "You settle down?" Jackson shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Man gets tired of wandering after a while. Besides," he added, glancing at Lily who was playing nearby, Some folks might need a grandfather figure around. Rebecca felt a rush of affection for the gruff old scout. "We'd like that very much, wouldn't we, Grant?" Grant nodded, clearly moved by his friend's decision. "We sure would." They continued their journey together, the three adults taking turns driving the wagon and riding. Lily divided her attention between them all, though she seemed particularly taken with Jackson, who revealed a surprising talent for storytelling. Silver Creek, when they finally reached it, proved to be everything Grant had described: a small but thriving community nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. The marshal's house was a modest but well-built structure at the edge of town, with a small barn and corral behind it and enough land for a garden. "What do you think?" Grant asked anxiously as Rebecca explored the house. "It's not fancy, but it's perfect," Rebecca interrupted, turning to face him with shining eyes. "Absolutely perfect." 2 weeks later, they were married in the small church at the center of town, with Jackson giving the bride away and Lily serving as flower girl. The townspeople, who had warmly welcomed their new marshal and his family, filled the church to capacity. As Rebecca spoke her vows, looking into Grant's steady gray eyes, she thought of that desperate day in Willow Creek when she had hidden Lily behind the church, certain their lives were about to end. Instead, that moment had been a beginning, not an ending, the first step on a journey that had led her to true love and a second chance at happiness. After the ceremony, as they greeted their new neighbors at the small reception in the town hall, a telegram arrived for Grant. He read it quickly, then looked up at Rebecca with a smile of fierce satisfaction. "They got him," he said simply. "Riley Blackwell, territorial marshals, cornered him in a mining camp 2 days ago. He resisted arrest and was killed in the ensuing gunfight." Rebecca felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that the threat was truly gone, sadness for the waste of human life, but mostly gratitude that they could now truly begin their life together without looking over their shoulders. "It's really over," she said softly. Grant nodded, pulling her close. "A new beginning for all of us." That night, after the celebrations were done and Lily was asleep in her new bedroom, Rebecca stood with Grant on the porch of their home, looking up at the star-filled sky. His arm was around her waist, holding her close against his side. "Happy?" he asked, his voice a low rumble in the quiet night. Rebecca turned to face him, rising on tiptoe to press a kiss to his lips. "Completely," she assured him. "Are you?" Grant's smile was all the answer she needed, but he spoke the words anyway. "More than I ever thought possible." As they stood there in the moonlight, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From terror to safety, from loss to love, from hiding to a home, it had all begun with a desperate mother, a hidden child, and a cowboy's promise. "I'll keep you both safe," he had said that day in the church. And he had kept his word, giving them not just safety but a future filled with love and hope. Rebecca Nelson Reynolds knew there would be challenges ahead. Life on the frontier was never easy, but with Grant by her side and Lily thriving in their care, she faced the future with confidence. They had built a family from the ashes of tragedy, a testament to the healing power of love and the strength of the human spirit. And as Grant led her inside to their home, their hands intertwined and their hearts beating as one, Rebecca knew that she had found not just safety, but the truest happiness a woman could know: a love strong enough to overcome any obstacle, a family bound by choice as well as circumstance, and a home filled with joy and promise for all the years to come.